A black teen is handcuffed by police right in the classroom, accused of stealing a classmate's watch. But what's the truth behind it? How will he turn the tables? Dive into this inspiring story. Don't forget to hit the like button, share, and subscribe to our channel to never miss our latest videos. The classroom of Lincoln High School buzzed with the usual hum of chatter on a crisp October morning, the scent of chalk dust and old textbooks lingering in the air. Sunlight streamed through the tall windows, casting long shadows across the worn wooden desks. Jamal Washington, a lanky 16-year-old with deep brown skin and a quiet demeanor, sat near the back, his notebook open but his mind elsewhere. His fingers traced the edge of a sketch he'd been working on, a blueprint of a makeshift security system for his neighborhood, inspired by the nights he'd spent patrolling the streets to keep watch. No one knew about that. To his classmates, he was just the kid from the rough side of town, the one who kept his head down and avoided trouble. Until today. The trouble started with Ryan Carter, a broad-shouldered white kid from the affluent part of the district, sitting 2 rows ahead. Ryan's family owned a chain of local stores, and he never let anyone forget it. His designer sneakers squeaked against the floor, and his wrist gleamed with a silver watch that probably cost more than Jamal's monthly rent. The watch had been the talk of the class all week, a gift from his father for acing his last math test. But now, Ryan's voice cut through the noise, sharp and accusing. "Where's my watch? Someone took it." His blue eyes scanned the room, landing on Jamal with a glare that could cut glass. "It was right here and now, it's gone. I bet it was him." The room fell silent, all eyes turning to Jamal. His heart thudded against his ribs, but he kept his face neutral, meeting Ryan's stare. "I didn't touch your watch," he said, his voice steady despite the knot tightening in his stomach. Ryan smirked, stepping closer, his shadow looming over Jamal's desk. "Oh, please. You're always skulking around looking at everyone's stuff. Who else would take it?" The accusation hung heavy, and a few classmates began to whisper, some with curiosity, others with suspicion. Mrs. Henderson, the gray-haired history teacher, stood up from her desk, her glasses slipping down her nose. "Ryan, calm down. Jamal, do you have anything to say?" Her tone was neutral, but her eyes flickered with doubt. A look Jamal had seen too many times before. "I didn't take it," Jamal repeated louder this time, his hands resting flat on the desk to hide their slight tremble. But Ryan wasn't backing down. He pointed at Jamal, his voice rising. "Check his bag. I saw him near my desk earlier." The class erupted into murmurs, a mix of gasps and snickers. Jamal's jaw tightened. He remembered passing Ryan's desk to sharpen his pencil, but that was it. Nothing more. Mrs. Henderson hesitated, then sighed. "Jamal, I need to see your bag." "School policy." The words stung like a slap. He unzipped his backpack, slowly pulling out books and a half-eaten sandwich, his hands shaking now. "No watch." Relief flickered, but it was short-lived. Ryan's smirk widened. He could have hidden it somewhere else. "Call the cop." Why, the suggestion sent a chill through the room. Mrs. Henderson frowned, but before she could respond, the classroom door swung open with a bang. 2 police officers stepped in. Officer Daniels, a burly man with a crew cut, and Officer Ruiz, a younger woman with a tight bun. Their uniforms gleamed under the fluorescent lights, badges catching the sun. "We got a call about a theft." Daniels said, his voice gruff as he scanned the room. Ryan pointed at Jamal again. "That's him. He stole my watch." Jamal's stomach dropped. He stood up, hands raised slightly. "I didn't do it, I swear. Check my stuff. Check anything." But Daniel's eyes narrowed, his gaze lingering on Jamal's worn hoodie and scuffed sneakers. "We'll decide that. Hands behind your back." "Kid," the click of handcuffs echoed like a gunshot. Jamal felt the cold metal bite into his wrists as Daniel snapped them on his face, burning with humiliation. The class watched in stunned silence, some with wide eyes, others whispering behind their hand. A girl in the front row. Sarah gasped. "This isn't right," but no one else spoke. Ruiz searched Jamal's desk and bag again, finding nothing yet. Daniels didn't waver. "We'll take him to the station. The watch might turn up there." Mrs. Henderson stepped forward, her voice shaky. "Officers, maybe we should," but Daniels cut her off. "Stay out of it, ma'am. This is procedure." As they led Jamal out, his mind raced. He thought of the nights he'd spent patrolling his neighborhood, chasing off petty thieves, fixing broken fences. For elderly neighbors, all unnoticed acts of goodwill. No one knew he'd saved Mrs. Patel's shop from a break-in last month, or that he'd returned a lost wallet to Mr. Torres with all the cash intact. Yet here he was being marched through the hall like a criminal, the stares of students burning into his back. Ryan watched from the doorway, arms crossed, a smug grin on his face. Jamal's chest tightened with anger, but he kept his head high. He wouldn't let them break him. Outside the school courtyard was a blur of green grass and gray concrete as the officers escorted him to their patrol car. A small crowd gathered, students with phones out, teachers whispering, and a few parents who'd arrived early. Sarah ran out, her voice cutting through the noise. "This is unfair. Jamal's not a thief," a boy next to her. Marcus nodded. "Yeah, Ryan's just mad because Jamal beat him in that debate last week." The murmurs grew, a ripple of dissent spreading. Daniels opened the car door, pushing Jamal's head down as he shoved him inside. "Save it for the station," he grunted, slamming the door. Inside the patrol car, the air was thick with the smell of leather and stale coffee. Jamal stared out the window, watching the school fade away, his reflection a ghost in the glass. He thought of his mother working double shifts to keep them afloat, and his little sister who looked up to him. They'd be devastated, but more than that, he thought of the neighborhood, his home, where he'd spent years proving himself, not to the police or Ryan, but to the people who mattered. His hands clenched behind his back, the cuffs digging deeper. He wouldn't let this define him. He'd find a way to fight back. Back at the school, the crowd grew louder. Sarah and Marcus rallied a group of students, their voices rising in protest. "Free Jamal." They chanted, phones recording every moment. A teacher. Mr. Alvarez stepped out, trying to calm them, but even he looked uncertain. Inside, Ryan lingered by the classroom window, watching the scene unfold. His grin faded as he caught sight of the growing crowd. He muttered to himself, "They'll see, he's guilty." But deep down, a flicker of doubt crept in. Doubt he quickly buried under layers of pride and the pressure from his father to always be the best. The patrol car pulled away, sirens silent but lights flashing, weaving through the streets toward the station. Jamal's mind churned with plans. He remembered the security camera outside the classroom, the one he'd helped install last summer as part of a school project. If it worked, it might show he never touched Ryan's watch. He clung to that hope, his heart pounding with a mix of fear and determination. The officers in the front seat exchanged glances, Ruiz scribbling notes while Daniels drove with a scowl. "And another kid from the Heights," Daniels muttered. "Always trouble, Rome." Ruiz didn't respond, but her pen paused, a hint of unease in her posture. At the station, the processing room was cold and sterile, with fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. Jamal sat in a chair, cuffs removed, but hands still trembling, as Daniels loomed over him. "Where's the watch, kid?" he demanded. Jamal met his gaze, voice steady despite the fear. "I didn't take it. Check the classroom camera." "It'll show everything," Daniels snorted. "Cameras don't lie, huh?" "We'll see," Ruiz stepped in, her tone softer. "We'll look into it, but you need to cooperate." Jamal nodded, seizing the chance. "Then do it, and ask the neighbors on my block. They'll tell you who I really am." The words hung in the air, a quiet challenge. Back at the school, the protest grew, spilling into the parking lot. Sarah held up her phone, live streaming to a growing online audience. "Jamal's innocent," she shouted. The seeds of doubt were sown, and the truth was about to unravel. Jamal leaned back, eyes closed, trusting in the justice he'd earned through silent acts of courage. The fight had just begun. Yeshramam. The patrol car rolled to a stop outside the Lincoln Heights police station, its flashing lights casting red and blue streaks across the gray concrete walls. Jamal Washington stepped out, his wrists free but still tingling from the cuffs, his mind a whirlwind of anger and resolve. The station's interior was a stark contrast to the chaos at school. A cold, fluorescent lit room with peeling paint and the faint smell of disinfectant. Officer Daniels led him to a small interrogation room, the metal chair creaking under Jamal's weight as he sat. Officer Ruiz followed, her notepad in hand, her expression unreadable. "We're going to ask you some questions," she said, her voice softer than Daniels's, but firm. "Where were you between second and third period?" Jamal met her gaze, his voice steady despite the knot in his chest. "In class. I sharpened my pencil near Ryan's desk." "That's it. Check the camera." Daniels leaned against the wall, arms crossed, his scowl deepening. "Cameras can be tampered with, kid. We need more than your word." Jamal clenched his fists under the table, the memory of Ryan's smug grin flashing in his mind. "Then ask my neighbors," he said, his tone sharp. "I've been helping them for months, stopping thefts, fixing stuff. They'll tell you I'm not a thief." Ruiz jotted something down her pen, pausing as she glanced at Daniels. He snorted. "We'll see about that. For now, you're staying here until we find that watch." The door clicked shut, leaving Jamal alone, the silence pressing against his ears like a weight. Back at Lincoln High, the courtyard had turned into a battleground of voices. Sarah, the girl with the quick temper and quicker wit, stood on a bench, her phone held high as she live-streamed to a growing online audience. "Jamal's innocent," she shouted, her voice cracking with passion. "They arrested him just because Ryan said so." Marcus, a tall kid with dreadlocks, joined in, her waving a makeshift sign, "Justice for Jamal." A crowd of students gathered, some cheering, others filming their murmurs, swelling into a chant. "Free Jamal! Free Jamal!" Mr. Alvarez, the young history teacher with a goatee, tried to intervene. His hands raised. "Everyone calm down. We need to let the police handle this." But his words were drowned out by the growing outrage. The news spread like wildfire. By midday, parents arrived, their cars clogging the parking lot. Mrs. Patel, a petite Indian woman who ran the corner store Jamal had saved, pushed through the crowd, her sari fluttering. "Jamal is a good boy," she cried, her accent thick with emotion. "He stopped a thief at my shop last month." Mr. Torres, an elderly Latino man with a cane, nodded beside her. "He returned my wallet with everything inside. This is wrong." Their voices added fuel to the fire, and soon hashtags like #Justice for Jamal and #Lincoln High Scandal trended on social media. The school principal, Ms. Hargrove, emerged from the office, her face pale. "We're cooperating with the police," she announced over a megaphone, but the crowd booed, their trust shattered. Inside the station, Ruiz returned with a laptop, pulling up footage from the school's security camera. Jamal leaned forward, hope flickering as the grainy video played. It showed him sharpening his pencil near Ryan's desk, his hands empty, then returning to his seat. No theft, no suspicious moves. Ruiz frowned, her pen tapping the table. "This doesn't show you taking it, but it doesn't prove you didn't hide it somewhere else." Jamal's heart sank, but he pressed on. "Check the timestamps. I was in class the whole time. Ryan's lying." Daniels, watching from the corner, muttered, "Or he's smart enough to cover his tracks." Meanwhile, at the Carter household, Ryan sat in his pristine bedroom. The silver watch glinting on his nightstand, untouched exactly where he'd left it. His father, Mr. Carter, a stern man with graying hair and a tailored suit, paced the room, his phone pressed to his ear. "You did what?" He barked, his voice tight with anger. "You accused that boy without proof. Do you know what this could do to our reputation?" Ryan shifted uncomfortably, his bravado fading. "He's always acting suspicious, Dad. I thought..." Mr. Carter cut him off. "You thought this isn't a game, Ryan. If this blows back on us, we're done." The pressure from his father, a man obsessed with status, had pushed Ryan to lash out, jealous of Jamal's quiet confidence and the respect he earned from teachers, despite his background. Back at school, the protest intensified. A group of students marched to the police station, their chants echoing down the street. Sarah led the charge, her live stream gaining thousands of views. Comments flooded in, some supportive, others skeptical. "He's probably guilty," one read. "Just another thug from the heights." But others countered, "Look at the video. He's innocent." The divide grew, mirroring the town's long-standing tension between the affluent east side and the struggling west side where Jamal lived. His neighborhood, a maze of cracked sidewalks and weathered homes, had shaped him, teaching him resilience but also exposing him to the stereotypes that now haunted him. At the station, Ruiz stepped out to coordinate with the school, leaving Daniels to watch Jamal. The officer's radio crackled, a dispatcher's voice breaking through. "We've got witnesses from the heights claiming the kid's a hero." Checking now, Daniels' scowl deepened, but he said nothing. Jamal seized the moment. "You'll see," he said, his voice low but firm. "I've been protecting that neighborhood while you're busy locking up the wrong people." Daniels' eyes narrowed, but before he could respond, Ruiz returned, her expression conflicted. "The camera footage is inconclusive, but we've got calls coming in. Neighbors say he's helped them. We need to dig deeper." The news reached the protesters outside, igniting a new wave of hope. Mrs. Patel's voice rose above the crowd. "Jamal saved my shop." "He's no thief," Mr. Torres added. "He's a good kid. Check the cameras around my house." The officers inside exchanged glances, the weight of public pressure mounting. Ruiz pulled up a map on her laptop, marking locations where Jamal had been spotted, helping Mrs. Patel's store, Mr. Torres' porch, even a playground he'd repaired. Daniels rubbed his temples. "This is a mess," he muttered. Jamal sat back, his heart pounding. The truth was surfacing, but the fight wasn't over. He thought of his mother's tired eyes, his sister's innocent smile, and the nights he'd spent guarding his block. He wouldn't let them down. Ryan back home stared at the watch, guilt gnawing at him. His father's words echoed, "Fix this, or you're out of the basketball team." The pressure had driven him to frame Jamal, a kid he envied for his quiet strength, a strength Ryan's money couldn't buy. He grabbed his phone, hesitating. Should he confess? The thought terrified him, but the growing online storm made silence harder to maintain. At the station, Ruiz approached Jamal again. "We're checking those locations. If what they say is true, this could change everything." Jamal nodded, his resolve hardening. The camera might not prove his innocence yet, but his actions would. The protest outside grew louder, a chorus of voices demanding justice, and Jamal knew the next move was his. The Lincoln Heights police station buzzed with tension as the afternoon sun dipped low, casting long shadows through the station's grimy windows. Jamal Washington sat in the interrogation room, the cold metal chair biting into his back, his mind racing with every creak of the building. Officer Ruiz had left the door ajar, her laptop still open on the table, displaying a map dotted with red pins locations where neighbors claimed Jamal had helped. Officer Daniel paced near the wall, his scowl etched deeper, radio on his shoulder crackling with updates from the growing protest outside. The chant of "Free Jamal" echoed faintly through the thick walls, a lifeline that kept his hope alive. Ruiz returned her expression a mix of curiosity and caution. "We're going to check those spots," she said, her voice steady. "You're coming with us. If this checks out, it could clear your name." Jamal nodded, standing as the cuffs were removed, his wrists red but his spirit unbroken. The patrol car ride to his neighborhood was silent, save for the hum of the engine and the occasional static from Daniel's radio. The streets of the Heights unfolded, cracked sidewalks lined with sagging fences, kids playing with makeshift toys, and the distant bark of a stray dog. Jamal's chest tightened as they passed Mrs. Patel's corner store, its faded sign swaying in the breeze. He'd saved it once, chasing off a thief under the cover of night, but no one had cared then. Now their eyes might finally see. The first stop was Mrs. Patel's shop. The small woman rushed out, her sari, a splash of color against the gray storefront, her eyes widening at the sight of Jamal. "With the officers, Jamal," she exclaimed, her accent thick with relief. "You're okay," Daniels raised a hand. "Ma'am, we need to know about his involvement here." Mrs. Patel didn't hesitate. "He saved my store last month. A man tried to break in and Jamal chased him away. I have the security footage." She darted inside, returning with a grainy USB drive. Ruiz plugged it into her laptop and the video played a shadowy figure fleeing as Jamal's silhouette stood firm, a broom in hand. Daniel's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. Next, they moved to Mr. Torres's house, a modest bungalow with a sagging porch. The elderly man hobbled out, leaning on his cane, his weathered face breaking into a smile. "Jamal, mi hijo," he called his Spanish, slipping into English. "You returned my wallet, $200. "All there," Daniels frowned. "When was this?" Mr. Torres scratched his head. 2 weeks ago, I dropped it near the park and he found it." No one else would have bothered. Ruiz noted it down her pen, moving faster now. Jamal stood silently, his heart pounding as the pieces fell into place. These were the acts he'd done out of instinct, not for recognition, yet they were now his shield. The final stop was the community playground, a patch of worn grass where Jamal had repaired a broken swing set last summer. A group of kids playing nearby recognized him, their eyes wide. "Jamal," a girl shouted, running over. "You fixed the swings." Their mother, a tired-looking woman named Ms. Jackson, approached the officers. "He's been looking out for us," she said, her voice firm. "Caught a guy spray painting our walls last month. We owe him." Ruiz pulled up the playground's security camera feed, another clip showing Jamal confronting a vandal, his voice calm but commanding. Daniels rubbed his neck, the scowl fading into something closer to uncertainty. Back at the station, the evidence piled up. Ruiz synced the footage with the school's camera, cross-referencing timestamps. The classroom video showed Jamal near Ryan's desk, but with no theft, while the neighborhood clips painted a picture of a boy who'd been a guardian, not a criminal. Daniels leaned over the laptop, his silence heavy. "This doesn't add up," he muttered. Ruiz nodded. "We need to bring in Ryan Carter. Now." Jamal's heart leapt, a mix of relief and anticipation surging through him. The truth was clawing its way out. At Lincoln High, the protest had swelled, spilling onto the main road. Sarah's live stream had hit tens of thousands of views, comments flooding with support. "Justice. Jamal is trending," she shouted, her phone shaking in her hand. Marcus waved a sign higher, the crowd's energy electric. Inside, Ryan sat in the principal's office, his father beside him, Mr. Carter's face a mask of fury. "You better have a good explanation," he growled. Ryan shifted, his confidence crumbling. The door opened and Ruiz stepped in, Daniels behind her. "Ryan Carter," she said, "we needed to talk about your watch." Ryan's face paled. I told you he took it," he stammered, but his eyes darted to his father, who glared. Ruiz held up the school footage. "This shows Jamal near your desk, but no theft. We've also got evidence he's been protecting his neighborhood, saving stores, returning wallets." "Care to explain?" Ryan's hands trembled. The pressure from his father, the envy of Jamal's quiet strength, and the fear of losing his status had driven him to lie. "I made it up," he whispered, head dropping. "I was mad. He's better than me in class. I wanted to get him out." Mr. Carter's face darkened. "You idiot," he snapped, but Ruiz cut in. "We'll need a formal statement. This could be a hate crime charge." Ryan nodded, tears welling, his world collapsing under the weight of his actions. Back at the station, Jamal was informed. Ruiz unlocked the door, her voice soft. "You're free to go. The charges are dropped. We're sorry for the misunderstanding." Jamal stood, his legs shaky but his spirit firm. "Misunderstanding," he said, his voice low. "You believed him because of where I'm from. That's not a mistake. That's a choice." The ride back to school was quiet. The patrol car's lights off now. Outside, the crowd erupted as Jamal stepped out, their cheers. A thunderous wave. Sarah ran to hug him, Marcus pumping a fist. "You did it," she cried. Jamal managed a small smile, but his eyes scanned the faces, some joyful, some ashamed. Mrs. Patel and Mr. Torres pushed through, their gratitude palpable. Yet not everyone clapped. The divide lingered, a scar on the community. Jamal knew this wasn't the end. The truth had won, but the battle against prejudice was far from over. Inside the school, Ryan faced his father's wrath and the principal's stern gaze. "You'll face consequences, Ms. Hargrove said, her voice cold. Ryan nodded, the weight of his lie crushing him. At home, his father's silence was worse than any punishment. Jamal, meanwhile, walked through the crowd, the hero of the hour, but his mind was on the nights he'd spent guarding his block, the nights no one noticed until now. He thought of his mother, who'd be waiting with tears, and his sister, who'd look at him with new eyes. The camera had saved him, but his actions had defined him. The fight was his, and he'd keep fighting. The Lincoln Heights police station had quieted down as the evening shadows stretched across the town, the chaos of the day giving way to a heavy stillness. Jamal Washington stepped out of the patrol car, his sneakers scuffing against the gravel as he faced the crowd still gathered outside Lincoln High. The chants of "Free Jamal" had turned into cheers, a wave of relief and triumph rolling through the students, parents, and neighbors who'd rallied for him. Sarah, her phone still in hand, ran forward, her eyes bright with tears. "You're back," she shouted, throwing her arms around him. Marcus followed, clapping Jamal on the back, his voice booming. "Man, you showed them." Mrs. Patel and Mr. Torres stood nearby, their smiles wide, their gratitude unspoken but palpable. Yet as Jamal scanned the crowd, he saw the other faces, those who'd doubted him, who'd whispered behind his back, who'd believed Ryan's lie because it was easier than questioning their own biases. The victory felt hollow, a bitter taste lingering beneath the cheers. Inside the school, Ryan Carter sat in the principal's office, his head bowed, the weight of his actions pressing down like a physical force. Mr. Carter stood by the window, his tailored suit wrinkled from hours of pacing, his face a storm of disappointment. Ms. Hargrove, the principal, sat behind her desk, her expression stern. "Ryan," she said, her voice cutting through the silence, "you've admitted to falsely accusing Jamal. This is a serious offense, potentially a hate crime. You'll face suspension and the school board will decide further consequences." Ryan nodded, his throat tight. I'm sorry." He whispered the words barely audible. Mr. Carter turned, his voice sharp. "You'll apologize to him in person. You've embarrassed this family enough," but Ryan knew the apology wouldn't fix what he'd broken. Not for Jamal, not for himself. Jamal, meanwhile, stood in the courtyard, the crowd parting as he walked toward the school entrance. He didn't want their cheers, their hugs, their sudden admiration. He wanted them to understand. Sarah walked beside him, her voice soft. "You okay?" she asked. Jamal nodded, but his eyes were distant. "I just want to see my mom," he said. His mother, a nurse who'd been working a double shift, had arrived just as the news broke. Her face streaked with tears as she pushed through to find him. "Jamal," she cried, pulling him into a tight embrace. "I knew you didn't do it." His little sister, Aisha, clung to his leg, her wide eyes full of awe. "You're a hero, Jay," she said, her voice small but fierce. Jamal managed to smile, but his heart ached. He wasn't a hero, not for this. He was just a kid who'd been forced to fight for his name. The school organized a meeting that evening in the gym, a makeshift attempt at reconciliation. The bleachers were packed, students, parents, teachers, even local reporters who'd caught wind of the story. Ms. Hargrove stood at the podium, her voice amplified by the microphone. "Today was a difficult day," she began, "but it's also a chance to learn. Jamal Washington was wrongfully accused, and we owe him an apology, not just from the school, but from this community." The crowd murmured, some nodding, others looking away. Ryan was called forward, his steps slow, his face pale. He stood at the podium, his hands gripping the edges, his voice trembling. "I lied about Jamal taking my watch." He said, his words echoing in the gym. "I was jealous. He's better than me at a lot of things, and I couldn't handle it. I'm sorry." The gym fell silent, the weight of his confession hanging heavy. Jamal sat in the front row, his mother's hand on his shoulder, his sister on his lap. He looked at Ryan, his expression unreadable. The crowd waited for his response, expecting forgiveness, a moment of closure. But Jamal stood, his voice steady. "I don't accept your apology," he said, the words sharp but calm. Gasps rippled through the gym. "You didn't just lie. You used what everyone already thinks about kids like me. Pour black from the heights to make your lie believable. You wanted me gone, and they let you. An apology doesn't fix that." He turned to the crowd, his eyes fierce. "This isn't about me and him. It's about all of you. You believed him because it was easier than believing me. That's what needs to change." The gym was silent, the air thick with discomfort. Ms. Hargrove cleared her throat, her voice shaky. "Jamal, thank you for your honesty. We'll be implementing new training on bias, on fairness. This won't happen again." But Jamal barely heard her. He sat down, his mother squeezing his hand, her pride unspoken but clear. The meeting ended with promises of change, but Jamal knew better. Words were cheap. He'd seen the looks, the whispers, the way some parents still avoided his gaze as they left. The divide in Lincoln Heights ran deep, east side versus west, rich versus poor white versus everyone else. He'd won today, but the war wasn't over. Later that night, Jamal walked through his neighborhood. The familiar streets, a comfort after the storm of the day. The cracked sidewalks, the flickering streetlights, the distant hum of a neighbor's TV. It was home with all its flaws. He stopped at the playground, the swing set he'd fixed creaking in the breeze. Mrs. Patel's store glowed softly down the street, Mr. Torres's porch light flickering. These were the people he'd fought for. Ones who'd fought for him. He thought of the nights he'd patrolled these streets, not for glory, but because it was right, the camera footage, the witnesses they'd saved him. But his actions had earned their trust long before today. At home, his mother sat at the kitchen table, a cup of tea in her hands, her eyes tired but warm. "I'm proud of you," she said, her voice soft, "but I hate that you had to go through this." Jamal sat across from her, Aisha asleep in her room. "I know," he said, his voice low, "but I couldn't let them win. Not for you, not for Aisha." His mother nodded, tears welling. "You're stronger than I'll ever be," she whispered. Jamal shook his head. "I got it from you." They sat in silence, the weight of the day settling like dust. The next morning, the school was quieter, the air charged with a new awareness. Students whispered about the meeting, some approaching Jamal with hesitant apologies. Others keeping their distance. Sarah and Marcus stuck close, their loyalty unwavering. "You change things," Marcus said, his voice firm. "They're scared to mess with you now." Jamal shrugged, his backpack heavy on his shoulders. "Maybe, but I'm not here for them. I'm here for me." He walked to class, his head high, the echoes of yesterday fading but not forgotten. He'd cleared his name, but the fight against prejudice would continue. And he was ready. The weeks following Jamal Washington's exoneration brought a fragile calm to Lincoln Heights, the town still reeling from the scandal that had exposed its cracks. The school gym, once a battleground of protests, now stood quiet under the winter sun, its bleachers empty save for the occasional after-school practice. Jamal walked its halls with a new weight on his shoulders, not the burden of suspicion, but the weight of expectation. His name had become a symbol, a rallying cry for change, but the stares lingered, some with respect, others with unease. At home, his mother's pride had turned into quiet concern, her hands busy with mending clothes as she watched him. "You're different now," she said one evening, her voice soft. "Be careful what you carry." Jamal nodded, but he didn't know how to let it go. The turning point came with a letter from the Lincoln Youth Leadership Program, a prestigious initiative funded by the city to groom young leaders. Jamal's name had been nominated by Ms. Hargrove, a gesture of amends, but the catch was written in bold. He'd be paired with Ryan Carter for a community service project. The news hit like a punch. Ryan, the boy who'd framed him, now forced into his orbit again. Jamal crumpled the letter, his jaw tight, but Aisha, peering over his shoulder, tugged at his sleeve. "You should do it, Jay," she said, her eyes wide. "Show them you're better." Her words stuck with him, a child's innocence cutting through his anger. The first meeting was held in the community center, a squat building with peeling paint and a flickering neon sign. Jamal arrived early, his hoodie pulled tight, his sketchbook tucked under his arm, his refuge of late filled with designs for a neighborhood watch system. Ryan walked in minutes later, his designer jacket out of place, his face a mask of reluctance. Ms. Hargrove facilitated, her glasses glinting under the harsh lights. "You two will lead a project to install security cameras in the Heights," she said, her tone firm. "It's a chance to rebuild trust, yours and the community's." Jamal's eyes narrowed, but he said nothing. Ryan shifted his voice low. "I don't expect you to forgive me, but I'll do the work." The project began awkwardly. They mapped out camera locations: Mrs. Patel's store, Mr. Torres's porch, the playground, Jamal guiding with quiet authority, Ryan following with hesitant steps. The first day they installed a camera at the playground, the cold metal biting their hands as they worked. Jamal stayed silent, his focus on the wires, but Ryan broke the quiet. "I didn't mean for it to go this far," he muttered, his breath visible in the chill. "My dad, he pushes me to be perfect. I saw you outshine me, and I snapped." Jamal paused, his screwdriver hovering his mind, flashing to Ryan's tearful confession in the gym. "Perfect doesn't mean framing someone," he said, his voice cold. Ryan nodded his head, dropping, and they worked on in silence. Word spread and the community joined in. Mrs. Patel brought tea. Mr. Torres offered tools, and kids from the neighborhood helped carry equipment, their laughter a stark contrast to the tension between Jamal and Ryan. The project gained traction online, Heights Watch trending, as locals shared progress photos. But the real change came in the interactions. One evening, as they tested a camera, a group of teens approached kids from the east side once Ryan's crowd. "Heard you're doing this together," one said, eyeing Jamal. "Pretty cool." Ryan managed a weak smile, the first sign of breaking from his old shell. Jamal watched, his anger softening, but not fully gone. The breakthrough came during a late-night session at the community center. They reviewed footage from the new cameras, ensuring they worked when Ryan spoke again. "I went to therapy," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "My dad's cutting back on the pressure, but it's hard. I'm trying to be better." Jamal looked at him. The boy who'd once been his enemy, now vulnerable. He thought of his mother's words of Aisha's hope. "Trying isn't enough," he said, his voice firm. "You have to mean it. Actions, not words." Ryan nodded, his eyes glistening. "I'll prove it, whatever it takes." The project's completion was marked by a community event. The gym filled once more, but this time with unity. Cameras were operational, and network protecting the Heights, funded by a grant Jamal had pitched with Ryan's reluctant help. Ms. Hargrove spoke, praising their leadership. But the real moment came when Jamal took the mic. "This isn't about me or him," he said, gesturing to Ryan. "It's about us, all of us. The Heights deserve safety, not suspicion. Let's build that together." The crowd clapped, some standing, the divide narrowing. Afterward, Ryan approached, his hands in his pocket. "Thanks for not quitting on this," he said. "I know I don't deserve it." Jamal studied him, the boy who'd hurt him now seeking redemption. "I'm not doing this for you," he said, his voice steady. "I'm doing it for them." He nodded toward the crowd. "Mrs. Patel, Mr. Torres, the kids, but I'll work with you. Not because I forgive you, but because I believe in what we can do." Ryan's shoulders relaxed, a small nod, his only reply. It wasn't forgiveness, but it was a start. At home, Jamal sat with his sketchbook, the neighborhood watch design now a reality. His mother joined him, her hand on his shoulder. "You're growing into something big," she said. Jamal smiled, a rare warmth in his eyes. "I'm just me, Mom. But I'll keep fighting for them, for us." The next day he returned to school. The whispers quieter, the stares softer. Ryan sat across the room. A nod exchanged a silent truth. The Heights was safer, the community stronger. But Jamal knew the journey wasn't over. He'd faced his trial, proven his worth, and now he'd lead with or without forgiveness, with a heart set on change. Jamal proves his innocence, overcomes prejudice, and leads a community transformation with a meaningful security project. An inspiring journey of resilience and justice. Thank you for watching till the end. Please like, share the story, subscribe to our channel, and turn on notifications to catch our newest videos.